My name is Michael Manuel Chaves, and I am sitting for a portrait.
Well, Mick did sit for a portrait for about nearly 6 hours, which is crazy. It was meant to be 3, but we just kept chatting, and I couldn't stop, because once I start painting, it's quite hard to stop. Anyway, I was a bit discombobulated by the whole technological aspect of setting up this first interview portrait. I started with an acrylic underpainting, but I didn't really think it through, and I just whacked a load of paint on. And this isn't how I would normally start a portrait. It looks ridiculous. Anyway, we got chatting. First thing I asked Mick was about his musical adventures and how they started.
Yeah, the musical journey started by pure accident. It was meeting a guy doing yellow boards on a roundabout back in 2021. So we used what's called yellow boards. We literally just put slogans on yellow boards and stood on roundabouts, holding them up to the traffic going by with, research this, don't inject children, this kind of stuff. And that's where, well, a lot of our community met each other doing stuff like that. We were, at the time, we were classed as unsociable, and all this, but time will prove that we were the ones that were right, and we will be looked on by history in a very different way to what we was looked on 3 or 4 years ago. And that keeps me feeling positive about humanity, knowing that when people look back on these days, they'll know what we tried to do and will be appreciated for it. So doing that, Rebels on Roundabouts with the yellow boards, I met a music producer. I didn't know he was a music producer at the time. And I met him and his wife just chatting away like you do. And then later he messaged me and asked if he could use my voice on a song. And I thought he meant a sample, just a few words. I'm like, yeah. He didn't ask me to go to a studio or record anything or say anything. He just said, could he use my voice? I'm like, yeah, of course. And then some months went by, and he sent me the first draft of Killer COVID, which was a song entirely my voice, to overlaying on the dance track, effectively, like scratching, Killer COVID, like that. It was hilarious. And it was brilliant at the same time, and I was like, wow. And then he said that he was gonna release it as a single, and I didn't understand any of that. I'm like, what, don't you have to,
Yeah, you're still like thinking old school, like,
yeah, you got,
a record deal.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
And...
That's exactly it. That's exactly what I was thinking. And he's like, no, I've got my own record label, which is effectively, what he releases his music on. All this, and I'm like, yeah, okay, sounds exciting. Yeah. So he did it, and I asked the people on my channel. I've got a YouTube channel. I had a YouTube channel in those days, a Telegram channel and Facebook and all that, before they censored me completely. And I asked everyone to download it, so they did. Lots of people downloaded it, and we released it just after Christmas, so as to get when everyone had stopped buying all their Christmas singles. We released it the first week of January, and it entered the chart that week at number 26. And it was mental. We were like, what is this? So we were really excited. We was waiting for the next week chart, and the top 100 came out the following week, and we weren't in the top 100, and we weren't anywhere. It had gone completely. The whole song had been deleted, and that was mad. And but on the strength of that song and that week, it was January 22. I had already followed you guys for a while. I've been like your #1 fan for a while, following Victorious around, and you invited me up on stage to perform. And I remember the first ever performance was at a place called The Latest Bar in Brighton. And that night, both me and Matt in the Hat were getting up to do a song. Matt was doing a poem, I was doing Killer. I don't think neither of us had ever been on stage before, And it was mental. It was mental. Exciting like you can't imagine. I was nervous like hell. It didn't sound anything like it sounds now. Yeah. It was like just some crazy nervous old man trying to remember the words for this song. That was in 22, and now here we are in 24. I've got my own band, and we're performing at the festivals. It was incredible. I mean, it's such an exciting feeling and it's a feeling that, like I said in one of my videos about dreams coming true. It's not a dream coming true because I never dreamt of it. No. I never imagined it. It never even entered my realm of, oh, I want to be a singer. I want to be the front man of a band. I want to get up on stage, you know. And it never entered my realm, let alone getting up on stage with the Blockheads, which is about to happen, you know, later in the month. It's not something I ever imagined.
The conversation then turned to activism and protests and what Mick was up to in those first few months of lockdown.
Yeah, the organising kind of came by accident, to be fair. Yeah, we were... we spent a lot of time following the Pied Pipers around London on a Saturday, you know, and we were there with the Million March and all that, and it was fantastic. But I got disillusioned quite quickly with walking around London on a Saturday, and people on my channel actually started messaging me, you know, and I was bitching about protests. And they said, Mick, you've got a channel, you've got a following, you do something. Because I said it needed to be done during the week, not on a Saturday. Saturday's like everyone's at home. So I organised the first Monday protest. And I've never done anything like that before. And when I say I organised it, I didn't organise anything. I just made videos saying, right, everyone, we're going to meet in Parliament Square, 12 o'clock on Monday, and we're not going to move. We're going to stay there the whole day. We're going to block Parliament Square. And I just kept making videos like that for, you know, a few weeks before this happened. And then other channels picked it up, other groups picked it up. And so when we got to that Monday morning, went to London, and it was mad. There was about 10,000 there. It was quite fantastic. But because we weren't going anywhere, we were literally just blocking, you know, Parliament Square of any traffic. It made it look even bigger and better. But people kept coming up to me like, oh, you're the organiser. And I'm like, well, I'm not, because all I said was, let's go there and let's stand there and do this. You know, I never liaised with any police or anything like that at that time, you know. I didn't know that was even a thing. I thought you just rock up somewhere and protest.
Yeah, isn't that interesting that is a thing?
Yeah, absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. You've got to get permission from the people you're protesting against to protest against them. I'm like, shut up. That is the most stupid thing I've ever heard. And you've got to sit down in meetings with them and get council permits. I'm like, shut up. So, no, we did none of that. So we did a few in London on the Mondays. And it became hard work, actually, because Mondays is hard for people to get time off. And it had the similar result to walking around London on a Saturday. They weren't going to change any of the rules just because we blocked Parliament Square for the day. You know, we still had to wear masks and stay 6 feet away from each other. So none of that changed.
What do you think about the whole protest thing? Worthwhile or not worthwhile?
Worthwhile for...
It's a lot of energy, isn't it?
For one reason, to meet like-minded people. We met like-minded people from all over the country. But yeah, I learned quite quickly that the protests were just a social gathering. Yeah. And we do much more fun social gatherings than walking around London, let me tell you. Yeah. You know.
And the conversation then turned to the nature of freedom.
And people think, oh, but we've got the freedom to travel. I'm like, well, all right, try and exercise that freedom. Try and go to France without a passport. Yeah. See how far you get.
Yeah.
See how free you are to travel to any other part of the world. Come off this island.
Yeah, but Mick, that's different.
Yeah, that's exactly what they say.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, everyone needs a passport. I'm like, well, no, you need to gain permission. And if you're an undesirable citizen, they don't give you a passport. So you haven't got permission. We just had a general election over here. You have to gain permission from them to put your X in the box. And you have to prove with photo ID, after you've gained permission from the government to put your X in the box, you have to prove with photo ID that it's you. I'm like, people can't realise. They think, oh, no, we've got the right to vote. They've just allowed you to vote, you moron. We're back to fake wars. We're back to fake elections. We're back to, fake terror on the telly, fake narratives. And it's exactly the same as it's ever been. And people get themselves so worked up and so scared. Oh, it's going to be like this. It's going to be like that. You won't be allowed to buy food if you ain't got the microchip. I'm like, just stop. You're delusional. You've got to look at the reality. And the reality is, that's the world we're going to be living in. And it's going to be a technical world. And they say, all right, so we don't need to put your money in the bank to pay your bills. We can just pay it from source. That'll be the way it is. It's just evolution. And I had a few debates with a few people who were pushing Keep Cash Alive and asking me to promote it on my channel. And I'm like, I can't promote that on my channel because that would make me a hypocrite. Because I don't use cash. And cash is wonderful. If you get paid cash in hand, it's absolutely wonderful. If you don't pay 30% of your wages in tax and national insurance, that's wonderful. I'm like, all right, I'll do it. When you all go to your boss and tell your boss you want to be paid cash and you don't want to pay your taxes anymore, see how that works for you. See how that works for if you work for, any company, really. Any company that don't work cash in hand.
But playing devil's advocate, you're thinking big picture. The Keep Cash Alive kind of movement is basically saying, if we hand over all transactions to the state. So I sort of get the premise of it, and I admire your honesty and not willing to be a hypocrite. It's like a lot of the kind of, we call it Freeman on the land stuff, and common law, lawful remedy, whatever. It's almost as important just philosophically, rather than. And that's not to say being practical isn't important, but it's a mindset, and sometimes it's difficult to actually put in practice. But the idea that it's all right to be able to transact without some kind of interference from the state.
I do, Jake. I get exactly. Yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. But the irony is, you're using a piece of paper with the late Queen's head on it, or a coin with the late Queen's head on it, to symbolise your freedom. You see the irony in that?
Yeah, I see the irony, but it's still better.
But better than using a computer transaction. Yeah, I get that. But I can't help thinking that is the old world and we're moving into a more technical world, and it's done.
But, like a lot of things, it's a question of choosing your battles, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
On an individual level.
Absolutely.
And that's what, probably similar to you, that I find the movement frustrating in the sense that a lot of people have this kind of holier than thou, or I think it's tied in with the fear as well. So that they're quick to criticise people if they don't do certain things.
Yeah.
But we're all just choosing the right path for us.
Yeah.
And every action has consequences. That's true, and we have to deal with our own actions and take responsibility for it.
It's only the right and wrong choice for them individually. Yeah. Like, I look at some choices, and we're going off at a tangent here, but I look at some choices. Most people before the COVID just paid their bills, paid their mortgage. I've had 3 mortgages over my life, bought and sold 3 houses, made a profit, got a nice bit of money in the bank. everything was happy in the world. But then the COVID happened and the freeman of the land, and you don't have to pay your bills and you don't have to pay your mortgage and all that. Right, that's fine, you don't. But the people in power don't recognise that you don't. And they believe that you do. So they've got the army, they've got the police, they've got the judges, they've got the courts. So when you stop paying your mortgage, no matter how right and just you are, the people in power don't care. And they will come and repossess your house. Now, we went to a repossession last week. It was a single bloke. He's a little bit younger than me, single bloke. And he's not been paying his mortgage. He's been doing this battle for 11 years. 11 years. The courts, the building societies, the banks haven't said, oh no, you're right, you don't have to pay, you crack on. No, that hasn't happened. For 11 years, he's had to go to court, he's had bailiffs come in, he's been evicted, they've recaptured the house from the bailiffs, and we were there last week when the bailiffs were coming again. He's a middle-aged guy, single, he can do this battle, it doesn't mean anything to him. And he can get 20, 30, 100 people, there was last week, outside his house, and that's fantastic. Picture now that you're married with 3 kids, and you're out at work and your wife's at home and she's just gone to get the kids from school, and then they come and repossess your house because you've decided not to pay your bills, and now you and your kids are living in a bed and breakfast that you can barely afford. Who's right, who's wrong? I believe you made a wrong choice. I believe that you've made your family homeless by saying, oh, I don't have to. Yeah, I know you don't have to pay your mortgage, but they believe you do. And they're the ones who just evicted you. Yeah. So I do not advocate any of that stuff. And I've openly said it. And I know I'm not the most popular man in the movement because of my stance. But I can't help that. My stance is my stance. Yeah. You know, I see things the way I see things. I'm doing a lot of talking, aren't I?
No, I was going to come back on that. Sometimes my train of thought goes a little bit when I'm
yeah,
and then I've got to concentrate
multitasking.
on this.
You're multitasking.
I can really listen when I'm painting. Not necessarily, like, I'll listen to podcasts when I'm painting.
Right, yeah.
Like, it's a different part of the brain. Taking stuff in, but actually then articulating is a bit different.
I'd always wish I could paint and draw. Can't. I've tried, I can't. This is going to be so old-fashioned. Well, this part of it, your part of it, but this part that we're doing here, I'm talking on the mobile phone, on the video cameras, on the computer, and it's all going to be on social media, which is the new world.
Yeah. I don't feel that there's a massive fear of technology in the movement.
I think it's the control. The fear is of the control that they will use the technology for.
Yeah, and I get that. You know that.
I understand it to a level, Jake. I do understand it to a level, but I believe that people just don't appreciate the amount of control that there already is. Yeah. And then you get upset. This really frustrates the crap out of me, Jake. There's a girl working in Starbucks. She gets shit money. She's got a shit job and she gets shit money, right? They don't have a till, they just have a card machine. And then you walk in there, you've come out of the Abbey National, you've drawn your money out with your cash, with your card, you've taken the cash, you know they don't take cash. You go in there, you order a coffee, and then you go to pay the girl cash. This 16-year-old girl who's already got a shit job anyway. And now you're going to start arguing with her because the corporation that owns the company she works for don't take cash. Like, this 16-year-old girl gives a shit. And you're giving her abuse because the company she works for don't take cash. And I get so angry with people within the movement, and they film it and they put it on social media like they've had some kind of fucking victory. And I said, over what, some poor girl who's on minimum wage, and you're abusing her because she don't take cash, and you think you've won some kind of moral high ground. You fucking morons. Sorry, stuff Stuff like that winds me up, Jake. It really does.
Like a lot of people in the movement, or just generally in life, they're not doing the work on themselves. And someone like that who's using that human interaction with that girl, that's where I totally am in agreement with you. Because I think people they're childlike.
Yeah.
They're still childish, they still think they're in a playground.
Yep.
And they're kind of trying to win these little battles.
Oh, drives me mad.
Just being human and like trying to just have a bit of compassion for each other and for those who might see things differently. Because I always think, there was a guy I used to listen to on the radio, Patrick Timpani in America, and I just remember one day he said, you know, everyone's just trying to do the best they can.
Yep.
And it just stuck with me. I was just like, I always try and keep that in mind. Like, I don't care whether they're pushing the jab or whether they're trying to do this, or it's a magistrate telling you you've got to do this or that. There are very few people who are actually intentionally being malicious.
Exactly. Anyway, I digress. Where was I? So my mum was in the old folks' home. And I used to go to the old folks' home in Islington and take her from the old folks' home in the wheelchair back round to where she used to live to see my dad.
Oh, right.
For some reason, she wanted to see him, you know what I mean? We all hated him, but she still had enough faculties about her to know that he wasn't around. And he never, ever once went to the old folks' home.
Right.
So I would drive her and he said to me, and this is really freaky, because I'd never even come across it. I'd obviously heard of it. He said, don't bring your mum round anymore, because there's a TB outbreak on the estate. I'm like, shut up, you fucking idiot. We don't even have TB in this country. And then I fucking get diagnosed with TB. I'm like, the irony of that isn't wasted on me, you know what I mean? The only one who ever mentioned TB in my world was my old man, you know, saying not to go there because we could all catch TB, and I end up with TB. Now, I had it obviously before that, just undiagnosed. They said it had been growing for years. So I had TB. No one around me caught it. That was the mad thing. It's meant to be a contagious disease.
Yeah.
No one caught it. I had 2 wives in the time that I was meant to have had TB. No one caught it. The kids all had tests. My ex-wife, I had to phone and tell her I'd been diagnosed. She had to have a test. No one else had it. Just me. And I had it everywhere. Like, it was...
How's it manifesting? I don't really know much about TB.
No, I didn't know much about it. I just thought it was a lung disease. But under the scans and the x-rays, it looks like cancer. Big black shadows, like big dents. But then when you go in to cut it out, you can't cut it out like cancer because it's like yogurt and you have to spoon it out effectively, which is why I ended up having 5 surgeries, because once you've got all the blood mixed in with it, you don't know what you've got out, you know. And it was on my spinal cord, which is why on the third surgery, he cut through my spinal cord by accident. And I had a spinal fluid leak. And then I came home and my back, I looked like Quasimodo. The fluid was just going under the skin, you know, in my back. So I had this big fucking hunchback of fluid. And I had to go in for surgery again. He had to go in and fix the spinal cord. I said to him, like, cause I couldn't walk anyway, I was paralysed. And I had to lay flat, and they put a drain at the top of my spine and at the bottom of my spine to carry the fluid, and I had to lay flat for a few weeks. They're the worst weeks of my life.
Were you scared?
Yeah, petrified. And the irony of this part is my sister's a Christian, born again Christian. She's the one who prayed for the miracle when they told me it was cancer. And she was in the hospital when the doctor came, the surgeon. And he was telling me what they had done, why I have to lay flat, and if I move it, it could ruin everything, so don't move. I'm like, cheers.
Yeah.
And I said, what happens if it doesn't work? And he said, we pray. I'm like, that is not what you want to hear from a surgeon who's just cut your back open for the fifth time. That was the fifth and final operation. That was the final operation. Because it did work. And I'm fixed. But you don't want to hear that from a doctor, you know. What happens if this doesn't work? Well, then we pray. What? You mean there's no B, you know, plan B, there's no nothing, that's it. If this don't work, you're shit out of luck, pal.
Yeah.
So learning to walk again was a miracle in itself. You know, learning to, from like, being paralysed is scary.
Yeah.
Like, scary as fuck.
Well,
you can't get your head around it.
yeah, even just when you get a dead leg.
Yeah.
You think, fuck, it's
Yeah.
vulnerable.
And that was the vulnerability, that was a real thing for me.
Yeah.
I always considered, I did martial arts, you know, I'm a big bloke, I lift weights and all that. And when I was a cripple, I realised that there's no way in the world I would ever be able to defend myself again. And I'm like, wow, like I relied on being this big, stocky, bald-headed, thug-looking guy with a little bit of fighting knowledge to being a cripple that couldn't even carry my own weight. And I'm like, oh man. And I really, vulnerability is the word. I really felt vulnerable. Never felt that before. You know, and that was one of the thoughts that went through my head, along with all the other thoughts that go through your head. The things that you think you'll never do again because you can't feel it. It was, you know, the whole, like, you're like, Jesus, that life is over. Everything about the life I had before, I believed was over. And the spinal cord is a really weird thing. Sometimes it can regenerate, sometimes it can't.
Right.
You know. Unfortunately for me, it's regenerated quite well, but there are still bits of me that are numb.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and you don't notice for the most part. Like, for the most part, until you touch it. Like, I've got an itch on my back. It's fucking mental, because that part of my back is numb.
Right.
So I'm scratching the itch, but I can't even feel the thing that I'm scratching the itch with.
Right.
But the itch is still there.
Is the itch real? Or is it one of those phantom?
Yeah, I think the itch is one of the nerves that is numb firing, you know?
Right.
I think it's that, and it's like a constant, you just want to scratch it and it won't go away. But even when you scratch it, you can't feel you're scratching it. So it's like, fucking hell. So I've got this whole section of, like, I could have a big tattoo across my back and not feel it. Right. You know, the tattoos I've had fucking hurt. Right. Whereas I could have one on my back and wouldn't feel it. Yeah. But learning to walk was important to me. I got down the gym. I used to go to the gym on crutches. I got on the treadmill and I made myself walk for hours on the treadmill, learning to walk again.
Did you have times when you were just fuck this,
Yeah. I had dark times, but over that, I would say a 3-year period. Over that 3 years, that was dark. Like, before that, I hadn't lived a righteous life, you know. And so first of all, I was told I had cancer. And then my sister, who was a Christian, came round and said, can she pray for me? And I'm like, yeah, knock yourself out. And then she did, and that was fine. I left her to it. I'm not a Christian. And then the following day, literally, I got a call from the hospital. saying, come to the hospital, we need to see you urgently. I'm like, fucking urgent, I'm dying. How urgent can it be? You know, they've not offered me any treatment. It's been 5 weeks. I've had cancer for 5 weeks. They've not offered me any treatment. I'm fucking nearly paralysed. What is it that you're gonna? And then the doctor said to me, what do you know so far? What have you been told? I said, well, I've got cancer in both lungs, in both lymph nodes and down my spine. And she says, let me stop you there, Mr. Chaves. It's not cancer, it's tuberculosis. And I just burst into tears. I'm like, what? And she...
And then you try to think, what's tuberculosis? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I knew it was a lung disease. I knew that, like, I only knew it from the cowboy films. You know, everyone died of consumption in those days. And she said it can be treated. And then they went on to mistreat me, but that's a separate story. But I just started crying, Jake. I'm like, I can't believe it. I'm not dying. I'm not dying. I said it. I must have said it. Like, while I was crying, I must have said it 10, 15 times. I'm not dying. I'm not dying. I'm not dying. Because I had 5 weeks to, like, start looking at funerals and all this sort of stuff. My family come to say goodbye. And then all of a sudden, I'm not. And I phoned my kids, I phoned my sisters. My sister, who's a Christian, that affirmed everything she believed in her faith, you know. And it did me, not in her faith, but in the power of faith. You know, my sister believed so much that a miracle happened. Now, the reality is, for all intents and purposes, that it was always been cancer, always been TB. Yeah. And the doctors told me that the amount of TB I had, because it grows notoriously slowly, the amount of TB I had, it had been growing for decades. And I'm like, you know, so like all through my 30s I would have had TB, all through my 40s I would have had TB. But the strange thing about it was, it didn't make me cough. So I never coughed at all, which is a telltale sign, you know. Right. So, you know, for nearly 2 decades I've had TB growing in my body, according to the doctors. But I never coughed once.
Interesting.
I went to the hospital the year earlier and they diagnosed me with asthma.
Okay.
And because I had this pain in my back, I was always short of breath. Always short of breath. And I'm like, how can I get so tired just walking around the block? Yeah. You know, doing very small amounts of exercise. Well, I am now. I've got that to live with forever, but now I know why. Yeah. Because my lungs are shot, you know. They're scarred up from the TB. That doesn't come back. So although the TB's gone, it's dead, there's just big chunks of dead lung, you know. Necrotic, they call it. Okay, yeah. Necrotic tissue. I'm like, yeah, cheers for that. My lungs are dead. Yeah. Okay. So that was, again, another scary thing. You know, I get short of breath very quick. That's why singing sometimes, I don't know if you notice when I'm singing, I'm fucking gassing. I'm like, just trying to get the sentence out and say the words. So doing spasticus, oh my God, it nearly killed me because it's constant. But I've changed it now. We were doing it. I'm spasticus. I just do spasticus, and I breathe between each one. And it makes life a lot easier for me. But, yeah, I don't consider myself, I mean, I know I've got physical limits now that I never used to have. But I don't consider myself, you know, a victim of it anymore. It was a learning curve, and the Mick that came out the other side is a much nicer person. Right. I've completely changed. And before that, I used to wear black all the time. Since the illness, I wear bright colours, all the time, bright colours. Yeah. And I've got a completely different attitude towards life. And I was having this conversation with Simon the other day. I was born again after the illness, but not born again into, you know, Jesus and all that. Although effectively it was my sister's belief that may or may not have changed my diagnosis. It didn't change me in that way. It just made me a much better person with a faith that there is a power out there greater than I can imagine. You know, and that's kind of comforting, because before I was ill, I never really had that. I was a complete atheist to everything. Now I'm completely open to everything. No, but you can put about Victorious should be headlining, surely. Because you see the energy when you guys were on.
Yeah.
Like, you must feel it as well when you're up there. You must feel that energy.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, this is just... And I was further to the back. And I was like watching everyone dancing, and it was like, this is incredible. And when you guys finished, no one wanted you to stop. You know, we could have all been there dancing for another hour. Like, even if I was putting on a big festival and inviting people, I wouldn't put myself as the main act every night. Like, you know, I've heard some people are doing. But I wouldn't try and upstage someone who is clearly, their act is done that way, you know. Like, you guys have got so many original songs. But in the time you had allowed, you only put, I think, one of them in.
Yeah, I think so.
And he said, talk for an hour. What are you going to talk about? I don't know. And people like write scripts and all this.
Yeah.
And it is easier if people ask you questions, because that puts you in the direction.
It is, isn't it?
But when you've just got to talk, you lose your direction. So what I did, sounds beautiful, turned into something that I completely didn't intend it to be. I thought I was going to be the funniest man in the world, you know.
I heard people, I didn't hear it, but I heard people were crying.
Yeah. I was crying, the audience was crying, everyone was crying. At the end, people come up and was hugging me. It was mad. It started off like a comedy. I was doing really funny jokes.
Yeah.
Not funny jokes. I was talking about the police trying to arrest us in the parks, you know, when we were breaking COVID rules. And I was like doing it in that style that I do, where I just rip the mick out of everything. And then we got onto the old folks' homes and the Midazolam murders. And then I just lost it. I just went full on crying, and it got dark really quick. But the thing was, like, the audience were identifying with me, with what was happening, you know? I was talking about people being outside of old folks' homes' windows, looking at their loved ones through the windows, and this kind of stuff. And the whole thing got really dark. And when you sit back and you think of what really did happen in that 2 years, it was like, whoa, they really did that. And it was the people that did it. Like, the walls come down from on high, but it was the people that enforced them. Like, I said it in my talk, both my parents ended up dying in old folks' homes. But I was able to visit my mum all the time in the old folks' home, take her out in a wheelchair, you know. I took her all over the place, you know. And then, thank God, she died a couple of years before the COVID. Because if they had tried to stop that, if they had tried to stop me visiting my mum in an old folks' home, I would have gone to prison. You know, I would have smashed the glass. But they were people that I would talk to every week when I turn up. And I can't imagine those people turning into little Hitlers. I'd be like, what are you talking about? I can't come in. You know, are you mad? I was here last week. I'm going to be in it. What are you doing?
Yeah, it doesn't take much.
No. So fortunately, I never had to experience it, but I empathised with other people that were going through it, you know, and it made me angry. That was one of the things that really made me angry. And there was, like, a lot of stuff during those days made me angry. So when I ended up talking about it, I got angry.
Yeah.
I got angry. I got upset, you know, like I do. I have a tendency to cry. I was crying, the people in the audience was crying. And I tried to talk through it, you know, stop myself crying enough to talk properly. Because it got really dark really quick. And I realised, Mick, you're not going to be a comedian. It ain't going to work. Yeah. You might think you're really funny, but it doesn't work. You go off on a tangent. I can be a comedian for about 4 minutes, and then it just goes to shit, you know. It's like, yeah, all right, you can't be a comedian. I sit there in a lot of comedy shows, completely pan-faced.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
I'm like, oh, come on now.
Yeah.
But the first time we saw Steve Hughes was at the Jam for Freedom Festival last year. I'd seen him before. I always used to watch, like Steve Hughes, I used to watch, who's that old guy? George someone. Yeah, I used to watch him, and the one who died of cancer, Bill Hicks. I used to watch them all the time because that was the kind of, I didn't sit there laughing. I took it more as a lecture than a comedy show. But then when I saw Steve Hughes live, and he did the same act this year, which was unfortunate, I just saw him again. It was the same set, and I was a bit gutted because when he did the set last time, I have dogs. I had 3 dogs. I've now still only got 2, although Lorraine's got a dog, so we have 3 between us. And he did this whole set about a guy who lived with dogs. And he's like, he doesn't have dogs. He doesn't have a dog. He lives with dogs. Mm-hmm. And if you come to my caravan, that is exactly my caravan. I live with dogs. Yeah. Like, the dogs have ripped apart the furniture. Like, how are you going to tell a dog to stop pulling at the furniture before it sits down like a cat? Yeah. Fortunately, the caravan I live in was made in 1972. You know, so it doesn't matter that they're pulling at the furniture. They don't sit on my chair. I've got a swivel chair, you know, a big armchair that I sit in, and like the dogs have made their home on the sofas around the caravan, and you can see that I actually live with dogs. It's mad. It's mad. The dogs run the place more than I do. So when he was doing that set, I was crying. Like, because I identified with it so much, I was just crying. It was like the funniest thing. And then he did a whole section which had me crying on ketamine and his experience. I was looking at you when he was doing that. I was crying. When he did it the year before, it was so funny because I identified with it so much. You know, like the first time, because I was a ketamine addict for a number of years, and I did rehab. I was in rehab because of the ketamine, and I haven't done ketamine since 2010. So that's like 14 years I've been straight. But I did it for a lot of years before that. And when he was talking about it in his set, I identified with it so much, you know, it was so funny. But like when I was a ketamine addict, it weren't funny, you know. And being a recovered addict, like, and I've had this conversation, being a ketamine addict is not like being an alcoholic. Like, I've, since I stopped taking ketamine in 2010, I've not been in the presence of anyone who has ketamine. Yeah. You know? So, like, if we were here doing this now and someone came in and said, oh, I've got a gram of ketamine, do you want a line? Yeah. That would, no, I don't know how I would react because I've never been in that situation. Whereas an alcoholic is faced with alcohol every day. Yeah. You know, they go out for a meal and there's people drinking wine. Whereas I've never been in the room since 2010 with someone who's got ketamine. So I don't even know how I would react. I like to think that I would be, no, you're all right, mate, I've given that shit up. I'd like to think that that was how I'd react. And I believe that the Mick that I know now would react that way. But the Mick from before the illness wouldn't. The Mick from before the illness would be, oh, lovely jubbly. We got some ketamine, you got some pills, what else you got going on? You know, that was a different Mick. This Mick would be, nah, you're all right. I've been positive. But you know what, like, and I've also said this, you're going to find it strange, but you'll know it as a singer. The rush I get from going up on stage with Victorious and the rush I get from being the front man of my own band is better than any other rush I've ever had. And I don't want it to end. I said it like, when I come up with Victorious, like, I do 2 songs. I generally did Killer COVID and Clever Trevor. I didn't want to get off the stage, you know. I'm like, no, I was like, give me the mic. Matt in the Hat's like that as well. He doesn't want to give the mic up. He's like, no, I'm enjoying this too much. And you must have that feeling when you go on stage, you know, and I'd imagine that it's only the fact that your throat's giving up that makes you want to stop. Otherwise, you'd probably go on all night. And I'm like that. I'm like, give me the mic. I'm loving this, you know. And I've become addicted to that rush, you know. And each time I get up on stage, I get that rush again. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is mental. You know, and sometimes I watch it back, like I told you earlier. I watched back some of the videos of me trying to sing Vaxi Taxi. And I'm like, oh my God, that was terrible, Mick. That sounded terrible. At the time, I'm like, yeah, look at me, I'm a singer in a band. Watching it back, I'm like, oh. You know, and I was still fairly popular in those days. I still had quite a few people because it was still in the COVID days. It was only when the COVID ended that people just started, and then I started speaking out about infiltrators and Pied Pipers and stuff like that. And your politicians that think they're going to come and save the world. That's when people stopped following me because they didn't want to hear that. They want to believe that this politician is going to come and save the world, and that you can vote your way out of it. And
well, there's only so much truth that people want, even so-called truth sometimes.
Absolutely.
And that's what we were saying earlier, isn't it? Like, it's surprising how few people you can actually have a conversation with that doesn't end in, if you're disagreeing, it doesn't end in some kind of emotional shit show. I mean, particularly I've sort of just been enjoying the whole flat earth thing, and for my own kind of benefit in a way, I just enjoyed using my brain and finding out more about the earth and what the conventional kind of idea is, and testing that with the theories of alternative theories. And obviously, my conclusion.
But we can come to our own conclusions using our own senses.
Yeah, but what's amazing is just how difficult it is to find people that you can talk to without it ending up in a fight. Even so-called truthers who should be the ones who are willing to just look at stuff objectively and listen calmly and take in other people's opinions and all that kind of stuff. And it's slightly demoralising, I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
How uncommon that is.
But you know what I do, Jake? You know what I do?
Go on.
And this is really terrible and it's really selfish. I distance myself.
Yeah.
Like with you today, I can spend time with you. I spend time with Victorious. Simon and Caroline, I love going there. We go out for meals, but there are some people that I just have to distance myself from.
Yeah.
I just like, I say hello, I'm polite, I'm friendly, but I know not to get engaged in a conversation.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that there is people like that. It's a shame we live in this world But if I'm going to get engaged in a conversation, then my nature is that I am going to give my full opinion, whether you want it or not. And it doesn't always work, Jake. So as you know yourself, so sometimes you think, just shut up, just move away, you know, just give it a wide berth, because otherwise, and I've got friends that are complete Q-tards, but I have to give them a wide berth. In the same way that I have to give Jabberwockies a wide berth. You know, it's pointless me getting into an argument.
Well, isn't that dependent on how they are, though? Like for example, there was one flat earth. You know, you can still find people you disagree with who are, you know, all right. They will actually discuss, and it's increasingly rare, but. You know, there was one guy say it sounds beautiful. He was a flat earther, and we had a really good chat. You know, and it was respectful.
It's good when it can be like that.
We listened to each other. You know, it's not so much that they disagree. It's more that they're not mature enough to be able to disagree without it being a mess.
Yeah. And
you know, and that goes back to like earlier when we were talking about someone going into a shop and, you know, giving some to some young girl at the checkout. You know, it's just about having respect for people, isn't it?
Yeah. But sometimes I think that my way of showing that respect is to avoid them. You know, I'm not a rude man. It takes a lot to make me lose my temper. And I have done it in a social gathering before, where I've been invited to someone's house for dinner, and I had to leave, and I made a right fool of myself because I lost my temper. And I said to this woman over the dinner table, okay, can we just agree to disagree? And it was about Andrew Bridgen. Yeah, but don't you? I'm like, no, look. Can't we just agree? Let's leave it. Let's not talk about it. And Lorraine was in the bathroom. She had left the table, and she could hear. And this woman wouldn't stop. She wouldn't stop until I ended up shouting at her, and I really lost my temper, and I was really embarrassed that I did it. But I see this woman on occasion, and I say hello. I give her a hug, but I will not engage in a conversation with her. Like, she pushed me to my limit, which I hate happening. I hate being triggered, you know. And I asked her half a dozen times to stop and to change the subject and let's leave it. And she wouldn't. And I thought, oh, you're pushing me. You want a reaction from me. And she got it, and it weren't a good one. You know, I didn't swear or shout. I just ended up, I did shout, but I said, will you just leave it? Leave it, I'm done. And then Lorraine came back from the bathroom, and I said, we got to go. And we walked out of this, and it was Lorraine's friends, and I felt really bad. It was Lorraine's group of people, and I felt really bad, and I've since been round and apologised for my behaviour, you know, and it's only happened that once, you know. And like I say, I still see the woman, and it's like, I can't engage in that conversation, because I know her style of conversation. And I've come across other people like it who I think, Mick, don't rise to it, you know, take the moral high ground, step away. And I do that with a lot of people, because my belief system is too open for people to accept. Like, for me, it's anything could be possible. So to commit yourself to one doctrine, because you've come across it at some point in your life, you've committed yourself to one doctrine. Whereas what I've spent 30 years doing, I've been exposed to so many doctrines. Like we was talking about earlier, Muslims. I spent hours in Muslim houses, you know, with Muslim families, watching how they operate, how live, you know, on a day-to-day. I've spent that time with Christians. I've spent that time with, you know, atheists, and I've been in at family dinners with blatant racists. You know, I've seen all the world for me to know that I don't know anything. And I might believe certain things, I might think certain things are true, but I can't know anything. And so when you believe that you know the world is flat, you've just limited yourself to every other option. Whereas I don't even know if the world exists, let alone whether it's flat, because that's what I've learned over the last 50 years. You know, I've looked into the holographic universe theory. It's fantastic theory. I can't say that I overly believe it, but I can't dismiss it, you know, because, and I look at the Christian theory, the Christian doctrine, and that makes a whole new world, that this is just one bit. And then when we get, like you were saying with the Muslims and the virgins, when we get over this bit, which is maybe a punishment posting, then we die and we end up in paradise and everything's wonderful and we're all in paradise. How long for? Forever? What do we do in paradise? Do you paint in paradise? Do I sing in paradise? How does paradise work? Do we just sit next to God and smoke marijuana?
This is the big question, isn't it? Because then it raises a whole load of philosophical questions about time.
Yeah.
Space. You know, existence. Our concept of who we are.
Yes.
You know, whether we are actually individual souls that continue, or whether we return to some collective. You know,
I think we turn into a collective.
Yeah, there's huge questions which a lot of people, you know, it's not easy sort of trying to wrangle with that kind of stuff.
I had this mad ass theory. Do you want to hear this really mad ass theory I've got? Right. Supposing I'm God, right, and supposing I've created the world, and now I want to experience what I've created. So I come back as me. And then, because I'm eternal, this can go on for billions of years. It doesn't have to be like we look at things in a 70-year lifetime. Yeah. It could be over billions of years, but also at the same time. So I want to experience this life as Michael Manuel Chaves, but I also want to experience it as Jake Fern. So I'm you as well. And I'm everybody else. I'm God experiencing what I've created.
Yeah. I've heard that kind of theory. I think isn't that the conversations with God theory? Something similar to that.
Oh, I've not heard that one.
You know, is it Neil Donald Walsh? Or...
There's me thinking that I had come up with a great theory and someone
but you say because you're God, so it doesn't matter.
Because I'm God, yeah, it's my theory. Yeah. I could just see this video will come out and everyone will say, Mad Mick thinks he's God. I'm like,
no, Mad Mick thinks he's Neil Donald Walsh. Yeah.
How many hours have we been doing this?
Nearly 4. We're not too far off.
Time flies, you know, because I've not noticed it.
No, I haven't.
Like this has been.
It's been really hard, you know. This has been really hard because you're talking and animated and expressions. I'm trying to
Really?
I'm trying to find I've never done that before. Like usually people just sit. I mean, chat a bit, but this is fascinating. Well, I'm sort of thinking I've managed to do all right.
What kind of expression? I mean, I've been angry.
Well, I've had to go for the kind of middle ground. So you're looking, but we'll see.
Am I looking cross-eyed?
I haven't even done the eyes.
Oh, right.
Well, it's because I know when I do the eyes, I think you're just gonna have to give me your eyes for a minute. I've managed to do the mouth, I think, even though you've been moving it a lot.
Yeah, non-stop.
But I think I've sort of got something. I mean, this would be like more of a study.
Yeah, because it hasn't felt like sitting for a portrait.
Good.
It's felt like me and Jake having a chat for a few hours.
Good, because I am aware that I haven't interacted as much as I thought. So it's new. It's an experiment for me.
Yeah. And
I actually thought I would find it easier to interact because I know when I paint I can chat, but actually chatting deeply and sort of really thinking about you, like, because I'm trying to engage with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is actually harder than I thought.
Wow. So I used to get Kojak a lot because it weren't seen. People just didn't see it. Back in those days, you had like comb overs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then Right Said Fred turned up, and after that, everyone just used to call me Right Said Fred for years. So I was happy about that. It was better than being called Kojak. But I look like an old man. There's a photo of me and my wife, and we're very young. And but I had a shaved head, and like people looked on the photo and thought it was her dad. I mean, she was only 4 years younger than me, so. But it was just like the glasses and the bald head made me look like an old man. So I don't suppose I've changed that much, except I don't have glasses anymore. I've got implanted lenses.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, I've had them for about 12 years. No, not 12 years, 20 years. 20 years. I had them in 2004. 20 years. You know. Yeah, my prescription was too high for them to do laser on. And I was under the laser clinic. I went there, they looked at my eyes and they said, oh, no, there's nothing we can do for you. Like, your prescription's too high. But they left me on their records. And then they messaged me like after about another 10 years or something, 5 or 10 years. And they said, we've got this new thing, implanted lenses. We laser the eye, lift it up, put the lens in, put the skin back over the top. I'm like, okay. But it was double the price. It was £1,000 an eye. Didn't matter in those days. I was working. I was like, bang, straight in. Yep, I'll have that. It was a very unique feeling of not reaching for my glasses. Although I did used to reach for them and then realised I didn't need them because I could see. Didn't realise my poor son, his eyes was bad as mine. But somehow with moving, he never had an eye test at school and he couldn't read and write. And we didn't find out till he was 10 why he couldn't read and write. It's because the poor sod couldn't see. But he didn't know he couldn't see. Like, he just assumed that everyone saw the world the way he saw it. And then, like, they'd put stuff on the blackboard and say, copy this into your book. And he, like, and learning to write, he just couldn't write. I mean, he could afterwards. He learned quite quickly afterwards. But talk about feeling guilty. Because my older two didn't have any problems with their eyes. But me, I was fucking blind as a bat. And my poor son's prescription was as bad as mine. And they expected him, or we expected him to be able to read and write. I was like looking at a book. Come on, read it. It says this. It says fuck all. There's no words there. It's just black marks on the page. I did feel a lot of guilt for that afterwards, actually. Oh, man. I don't think he holds it against me now. Now, I had, like, me and his older brother, we're still crap at reading and writing. But he reads and writes really quickly. So maybe he could have gone a lot further if he had learned, because he had to start learning to read and write in secondary school, which is a big deal, you know what I mean? If you go to secondary school and you can't read and write, because you've never been able to see the bloody letters.
So was he like short and long-sighted?
Yeah, completely. Like everything, just a blur.
There wasn't even like a midpoint
There is with distance stuff, but reading, no, there was no level for reading, and he just, like what we looked like, he didn't even know what we looked like until he got glasses. So you can imagine all of a sudden he's seeing his mum and his dad looking completely different than he had known them all his life. And he's like, fucking hell's this? You know, who are you kind of thing. It was fucking, oh man. I felt so bad. I felt really bad. So, and it was something you just can't undo. You can't make it have not happened. And it was, how did it happen? How was we How did we not know?
Yeah.
Because like he could he'd walk round things, he wouldn't walk into stuff, you know, and he could pick objects up.
Yeah.
But it was horrible. But he was always special as well. Like he was on the spectrum. We could have got him statemented, but my wife didn't want to do that. She wanted him to have a normal life. And I'm like, but he'd have a normal life. It's just that people would know that he's special, you know. She looked at it as some kind of weird labelling, and I'm like, well, yeah, but it's a labelling that explains his behaviour, because otherwise he's just a fucking odd child that you can't explain his behaviour away with him just being odd, you know. It's just odd. He couldn't socialise with other kids. He didn't know how to speak to people. Even like as a teenager, he's decided he's 25 now. He doesn't work. But as a teenager, when he was getting jobs, he couldn't keep a job for more than a couple of days. So he didn't know how to speak to people.
Right.
And he didn't like speaking to people and he couldn't be told what to do. And he's still like that now at 25, which is why he doesn't have a job, because he can't be told what to do. He goes mental, like absolutely mental. He has these weird tantrums. Like, what are you doing, child? It's a very strange boy. So he's always been special. Yeah. I'm just mesmerised. How weird is that? I don't know how I expected to feel.
Yeah, still going.
Almost feels like I'm looking into my soul. I don't know how it feels like. It's nice. It's not. It almost feels like I'm looking at everything we've been talking about for the last 4 months. You know, it feels like you've captured it all in my face.
Right.
Mad. Love it.
Oh, brilliant.
Love it.
Well, I might just tweak it a bit and get rid of some of it. Because the light was changing, so you did one bit and then the light changes and you change it.
Yeah.
And it's like,
You can see, like, obviously, the light was shining on my face. Like,
yeah.
the light was shining on your face on this side.
Yeah.
So I was kind of squinting a bit because the
Yeah.
light was shining off
Yeah.
your face into my eye. So you could almost capture that in it. That's amazing.
Yeah. Worth sitting through, you've done really well.